I have been deeply moved by the very enthusiastic and affectionate messages which have come to me from all parts of the world. These messages of assurance, of confidence in me, as the Salvation Army's international leader, with their sincere expressions of appreciation of my having followed in the years that have gone by in the footsteps of the founder of the Salvation Army, my father, so this goodwill toward me shall be answered by me in sacrificial service to the peoples of every land.
I see forsaken children. I see the tears that fall from women's eyes once married, now never laugh at all. I see the sins and sorrows of those who sit in darkness. I see in lands far distant the hungry and oppressed. But behold, on a Calvary, the world forgot, the world forgot. I give my heart, I do my part. The world forgot, the world forgot, the world forgot. I'll do my part to reach the world forgot. Give us fire that makes men heroes, turns weakness into might. The fire that gives us courage to suffer for the fight. The fire that changes spirit to Pentecostal deadly. The fire that makes me willing to live and die for Christ. For behold, on a hill, Calvary, the world forgot, the world forgot. I give my heart, I do my part. The world forgot,
you again this year. You know we met each other last year, and we had a lovely day. We were very happy all together. Since that day, I have been a very long journey. I have been all around the world. I have been to India, where the sand is so hot and the sun is so strong. And when I got to India, I heard the children, the little Indians, singing. And what do you think they were singing right away there in India? Now let us sing that. Let us sing that song. Oh, we want
Thomas R. Marshall, Vice President of the United States of America, under President Woodrow Wilson, said, "The greatest man I ever met was not a man. He was a woman, and her name was Evangeline Booth. If instead of being a Salvation Army officer, she had been a politician, it would not have been worthwhile for anyone to run on the other ticket." While it is tempting to look at the many accomplishments of General Evangeline Booth as the result of her natural intelligence, her charisma, or simply the result of being born a Booth, this explanation is, at its best, incomplete, and significantly, Evangeline Booth herself would have dismissed it. As Mr. Marshall noted, she would have thrived in almost any profession. But instead of choosing worldly success and riches, she chose to follow the call of Christ. By giving her all to Christ for his use and mission, the many talents and gifts of Evangeline Booth were magnified. She dedicated herself to doing the most good and preaching the gospel. She boldly set her sights on transforming the world for God, and she did. This began with the understanding that the good things we do are timeless and eternal. When you look at Matthew chapter 25 and Jesus' story of the sheep and the goats, Jesus says in verse 34 that his kingdom has been prepared for you from the creation of the world. And in verse 46, the righteous go on to eternal life. The foundational values upon which God's kingdom are built have always existed and will always exist. As the world has grown and changed, God remains steadfast. Hebrews 13:8 declares, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. One of the things that distinguishes God's compassion from our human schemes of compassion is that human compassion often seems to have an expiration date. For instance, one year I decided to make beaver tails for my family to celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving. Beaver tails are a Canadian pastry that's cooked in the shape of a beaver tail. My family absolutely loved them, and from that moment on, they kept begging me, "Come on, Mom, make beaver tails again." And I kept telling them, "Well, it's not Thanksgiving. I can't make beaver tails. It's not the right time of the year." Now, as a matter of fact, the stores continued to sell yeast and flour and sugar and all the ingredients for beaver tails. I just didn't want to put in the time and effort. So how often do we treat our acts of kindness in the same way? Despite being surrounded by need and having the availability to help, we assume that we need to wait until a scheduled time or season. As Jesus relates the story of the sheep and the goats, he places a great deal of emphasis on time. Notice the number of occurrences of the words when and then. Jesus begins in verse 31 with when the Son of Man comes. And he is asked repeatedly by both the sheep and the goats, when did we see you? The implication is that the occasion did not matter as much as the service which was needed and given. As Evangeline Booth would say, it is not how many years we live, but what we do with them. Notice also that the teaching of Jesus takes the focus away from the people to whom compassion is given and places it squarely on those who have the power and the resources to give. It is striking just how much the type of service does not matter in Matthew 25. The righteous sheep are commended for feeding the hungry, giving drinks to the thirsty, housing strangers, clothing the naked, and visiting the sick, and visiting the imprisoned. To borrow an old Nike slogan, when a need presents itself, the righteous just do it. As Proverbs 3:27 advises, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act. Unfortunately, when we focus on how worthy or how worthwhile our giving is, rather than on the giving itself, it becomes easy for us to withhold that service. This is the very excuse that the goats use in Matthew 25:44. Lord, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not help you? Apparently, the goats had the resources. Notice they never claim that they don't have food or water or clothing or time to give. Jesus does not hold them accountable for withholding what they do not have. The problem is that because they could not or did not see that their service was giving to Jesus himself, they refused to give. Rather than showing compassion for the sake of compassion itself, they wanted a guarantee that they were serving Jesus himself and would reap the reward. Evangeline Booth said, "The better world is the home as well as the sure reward for the faithful unto death. Whatever we receive in return for our compassion will not come from this world, but from the better world that lies beyond it." When the 1906 earthquake struck the American city of San Francisco and destroyed 80% of that city, and notably every single Salvation Army in that city, Evangeline Booth reportedly emptied the Salvation Army's entire national reserves to fund the relief effort. In hindsight, we applaud her boldness. We recognize this very event as the beginning of Salvation Army's worldwide commitment to helping in times of great disaster. However, at the time, such a move could have meant financial ruin for the Salvation Army in the USA. Despite the obvious risks, Evangeline saw a great need and determined to put all the resources she had toward meeting that need. She would say, "Give if it means to suffer. Give if it means to lose. Give in life. Give in death. Give forever throughout eternity." Perhaps the most important lesson that Jesus teaches in Matthew 25 about the sheep and the goats is that one group goes to eternal reward while the other goes to eternal punishment. For some, this might seem extremely harsh, but such a view fails to misunderstand the role, or such a view misunderstands the role of the shepherd. For many shepherds, separating sheep and goats was a daily chore. Sheep have thicker coats. They were more docile animals. They could safely be left outside overnight in the elements. Goats, on the other hand, required a protective enclosure. Their coats are thinner and they need refuge from the cold winter temperatures. Additionally, goats are more prone to escaping and putting themselves in harm's way. Separating the sheep and the goats each night was a sign of the shepherd's loving care, a way for the shepherd to assure that each day the goats could be safely brought out to graze in the pasture with the sheep again. Just because the sheep and the goats graze in the same pasture, it does not mean that the shepherd is ever ignorant of the difference between the two. It is only on market day that the goats and the sheep were separated according to value, as the butcher would not pay the same price for a goat as for a lamb. Each day, our good shepherd has done everything to enable us to do his will. He places all of us in the pasture of this world where we have opportunities to serve. Our good shepherd knows the difference between the sheep and the goats. In his love, he protects both. In his love, he gives resources to both. In his love, he meets the needs of both. In his patience, grace, and forbearance, he allows both to occupy the pasture lands of this world, where we have the choice. We can choose to be goats who refuse to follow the shepherd, who sneak out and get ourselves in trouble. Or we can be his sheep. We can follow his mission of service and redemption. We can choose to make that mission, his mission, our mission. The world for God. And pledge, like Evangeline Booth, to give our heart and do our